Welcome to yet another episode of Disruption Talks, where we invite top experts to discuss digital acceleration, winning strategies, innovation, and scaling products. My name is Grzegorz. I'm Engineering Consulting Director at NetGuru, and today my guest is Shaun McGirr, EMEA Field CDO at Dataiku. Hello, Shaun.
Hello, Grzegorz. How are you?
Quite good. And what about you?
I'm really well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Perfect. Glad that you accepted our invitation. Shaun, I'm really curious, how did you first become interested in data and what led you to pursue it as a career? If you could give us some more background.
Sure. I think like a lot of people who work in data, there wasn't ever a grand plan. Certainly the job data scientist was not on the career counselor database at high school. And so I first got started about 20 years ago when I had a job between high school and university, and a kind of a bit of an administrative job in a government agency in New Zealand, where I'm from. And they gave me two printed out lists of numbers, and they asked me which numbers are in list A and not in list B. And so I started off with a ruler and a pen. I didn't want to come across as annoying or arrogant, and then I did that quickly. And they said, "Well, can you do this again?" I said, "Well, maybe you could email me those, and we can save the paper." And then I started to get into the slippery slope and the wonderful world of Microsoft Excel, Visual Basic code writing, and then just kind of went from there. But it started from me just solving one problem someone gave me, and being a little bit bored by the way that they suggested to solve it, and deciding, let's not do that again. Let's find something else. So then they kept giving me more interesting things to do, and so I just never stopped.
So that's quite interesting, because many such stories start with, you've got like a CSV file already, something like that. Your story starts with pen and paper. I
One
like
step
that.
Before. Even
Yeah,
older
that sounds like the time when the hype around data and machine learning was not there yet, or at least not at this huge amount that we see today. What I like in your response is like that you were bored solving this with pen and paper, then also in Excel, I believe. So maybe that's one of the reasons why you are working at Dataiku. Could you share more about that?
Yes. So I think I kind of adopted from that point on this motto that, to the extent that I can, I should try to automate the parts of my job where I think I've already created the value, and I want to do something else to create more value. So it's a little bit of a personal motto for me to waste as little time as I can resolving the same problem over and over again. I mean, if you've got a new version of the problem, or you think of a newer solution, that's great, and that is aligned with Dataiku's philosophy. It's no accident that I work where I do. Our product is all about helping people discover value quickly from data, and then not having to spend 99% of the time the second time they want to do that. There's lots of they probably have other ideas, and they should move on to those other ideas.
Sure. I recall that we've been researching the market for this kind of automation tools for machine learning and data a few years back. And well, at that time, there was not so many tools. So Dataiku was one of the most comprehensive at that time. And also it was not only machine learning ops, but also some other areas. But I'm wondering that nowadays ML ops is like definitely a hot topic. Everyone is talking about that. You have 1,000 people around specific communities. Companies are learning how to do that properly. So we had DevOps revolution some time ago. Today we have MLOps revolution. Some even coined the term of LLM ops recently for those large language models. I'm still wondering, how do you find your sweet spot? How do you find this right place for Dataiku in so diverse world of challenges?
It's a very good question, a very real and current challenge. You mentioned the DevOps revolution. I think many of us are still waiting for the MLOps revolution to really actually happen. I think some of the ideas behind that revolution are very well established. I think we know what kinds of ideas we can reuse from the DevOps revolution. I think we understand that some things are a little bit different in the data world and the machine learning world, but I think everyone's starting to understand how those things can be made more standardized. I think I just said the word standard and it made me realize that one of the things that helps operations become smoother is standards, right? If every single company, every single team is inventing its own standard in order to push a machine learning model to production, I mean, there's just a natural limit to how many models you could possibly have. So that's a little bit our approach at Dataiku. We're not very opinionated about where the models end up, or even how you build them, or even what you build them in. And so to help with that, we're adopting standards as they gain acceptance in the market. So ML Flow is one standard that we adopt now that we didn't have that, in the platform a couple of years ago. Now we do, because we see a lot of people building models in different places, wanting to put them in different places. So I think the revolution is not yet really started. Maybe LLMs force something that hasn't happened yet. I'm not really sure, but we really want, at least at Dataiku, to make that path as smooth as possible for people. But we're not the kind of people that insist that you have to do it our way.
Okay. Well, there is quite a lot of challengers in this area. So there are more and more companies starting up their businesses around MLOps, around data ops, LLM ops, whatever. But still, you have been named by Gartner a leader for 2 years in a row. What is your secret ingredient to be in that leader space? Is it this approach that you've mentioned, like not imposing any specific constraints on your end users?
I think so, yeah, and that comes in two dimensions. So if someone asks me, what is Dataiku, what makes it different, the first thing I always talk about is the way you put it is really nice. We don't want to impose constraints on who can build data products, right? So it's very important to us that there's a low entry barrier, right? No one has all the talent that they need. No one should need to write code to build a data product. Obviously, it's nice if you can. And so we don't put constraints really on how people build their interfaces for people who write code and people who don't. And then, that's a really good thing. It's not quite enough, I think, to make secret sauce. There's lots of platforms that provide lots of interfaces. So the other ingredient in the secret sauce is that agnosticism, right? That lack of opinionation about where things run or where things are deployed. That is quite unusual. If you look at most products, data science platform type products on the internet, they always start with, here's a lot of things you could connect to, and then there's one thing in the middle where the magic happens. And we certainly want to provide that experience where people choose to come and build their data products in Dataiku. But we think everyone's data is already in enough places, and that they probably don't need to move it to yet another platform. And so that's why we make sure that we pay the integration tax, really, to make sure that these different people are not constrained in who can participate, but they're also not constrained by the particulars of the technology underneath, because that technology moves so quickly. And if people are constantly having to update the way they do things, that will take time away from what they're building and why.
Okay, that's an interesting perspective. I know that there were quite heated debates in the last years related, and this balance related also to how you should put your emphasis on building data solutions, whether it should be created in, let's say, Jupyter Notebook, in Python modules, or in Dataiku. You can do that with a visual first approach. Well, it all has some kinds of trade-offs. And I'm wondering, especially if we add this one more piece to the equation with this visual first approach of Dataiku, how to balance this time to value and maintainability of the data project. Because you've mentioned this one thing about relieving tax that comes with integrations. I believe this is somehow built in the Dataiku in this visual composer part. I would love to know your opinion on these three approaches. Maybe there is another one which I'm missing today.
You're absolutely right that it's about trade-offs, right? And different people with different skills and different technologies will make different trade-offs. So we see a few different things that Dataiku customers do. I think sometimes relatively expert data scientists who are quite used to writing their own code, you see their Dataiku projects at the beginning are kind of load data, run Jupyter Notebook, send the result somewhere else. And so there are these kind of comical 3-element flows where you do wonder, like, why Dataiku for those people? And the honest answer is that in some enterprises, even that is valuable, right? A safe and scalable place to run Python is not something that everyone working in an enterprise automatically has. They may be able to get Python on their laptop, but getting it in a place, in a setting where they can run things consistently is challenging. What we see those customers then do over time, even those customers, is start to use more of the visual features, right? I'm not a computer scientist by background, so all of the programming that I ever learned was pretty much self-taught so that I could solve, the problem that was in front of me, automate it, and move on. So I don't think that I've ever written like really very good or well-engineered code, but I do know that the pieces of code themselves did the thing that I wanted to do, and they could pass tests that they could do that thing. So I knew the data and the question and what I wanted the code to do to the data. I don't have the background and didn't have the time ever to become also an engineer. And so what those teams that maybe start off not leveraging Dataiku fully end up doing is actually use the visual interface as a way to be more modular, right? So modularity is something that enhances reusability and smoothness to production, and robustness in production, and tracking errors and all of that kind of stuff. And so over time, even the people who write code start to write code in boxes, and they use the boxes to do the orchestration, right, and to make it clear what comes first and how it all stitches together, really.
Okay, so I will rephrase that a bit, how I understood that, because I still recall one of the conversations with Jeremy Ravenel, who was creating some kind of an automation tool around notebooks. He even went to Netflix to investigate how they are using notebooks in production, because this was also part of this heated debate. How can one use notebooks in production, right?
Yeah.
How on earth? So basically he got there. And the key to use it successfully in production was not to use it for training the model itself or running some other kind of data transformations. It was rather for reporting purposes. So they were like visualizing the progress of experiments. They were visualizing what was the performance on specific data sets. Static reports, nothing else, which was correlated to specific experiments that they've conducted. However, from what I've heard from you, this kind of, I would say, this kind of habit is not enforced in Dataiku, because key to using notebooks successfully up to some extent appears to be like constraining ourselves properly. In that specific area, what do you say? And the key to success of Dataiku is actually putting no constraints on users. However, at the same time, you've created a product that encourages those good practices subconsciously, so that people are doing this decomposition and take care of good practices themselves because the environment supports them to do so.
That's exactly right.
I get that correctly?
Absolutely right. So I hope and I think it's consistent with what else I said. It's people will do what they need to get the job done, and if you facilitate a path to doing that encourages better practice, then you get better practice. In my experience and running data science teams and data analyst teams and blended teams and trying to get them to change their practice can be very hard to get an individual or a team to agree on particular new ways of working. So it's exactly right that we don't enforce anything, but we help people discover how they can really be more efficient over time. Not everyone has the resources of Netflix, right, to solve the notebook challenge. Themselves.
True. I really like your approach because it is like, very, very gentle one, because it is much easier, or maybe it's not easier, but it is much more learning friendly to build this kind of experience, which empowers you to achieve these same things and learn over time how you should structure the solution, instead of imposing just some strict rules which team does not understand at the very beginning.
Yeah, it's already challenging enough, some of this work. So especially when we think about bringing more people into this job, right, from different backgrounds, if we put up really high entry barriers and a lot of rules up front, it can be quite a turnoff if you didn't go on the journey the way that I did.
Well, yeah, it's like looking for unicorns, because you want to have someone with data expertise in general, software engineering expertise, some containerization, maybe DevOps, maybe then product expertise, and so on. And it is even hard to find the talent. Okay, but one of the main topics for today is the influence of AI in maximizing the return of investment, and this is one area that I would like to touch, and especially related that we've mentioned, those cost of talent, especially looking for unicorns, maybe super high. Costs of data storage are increasing. You've mentioned also this part with integration tax relief. A lot of tools will be imposing those extra costs, especially if you have data duplicated across many different places, and you need to transfer them over and over again. How can AI increase your ROI? Maybe in those areas, maybe despite those areas. How do you see it?
I think when I get that question, or questions like that, it's always tempting to think about AI and maybe even the sort of the wave that we're living through right now, as a way to squeeze out another 1% or 2% out of an existing process, and that's definitely fine, and we should do that as long as the ROI is good. But I think there's some areas of companies, and the two places that I sometimes encourage people to look is within data teams and data workers themselves. How can AI actually help them do their work faster and better? And I think there's some interesting gains to talk about there. But then if you go like one level deeper into how companies spend their money on infrastructure and technology to run things, I don't know if you've ever been into an IT operations center, but there is that DevOps revolution, that ops revolution still has somehow not come to the actual ops of IT and data centers and cloud spending. And I'm not exactly sure why they've avoided it. I think part of it is, there's been data and dashboarding and alerting in those areas for quite a long time. But I would expect to see over the next 5 years that companies that spend a lot on cloud and storage and IT infrastructure start to get pretty smart about how they use AI to reduce those costs. It will require the kind of change of mindset that was required to make DevOps happen, right? It's all very well to say, we don't want silos between dev and ops, but it actually takes quite a lot of work to do that. But if we think about the amount of data being stored in terms of images, pictures of inspections of equipment, right? And it's kind of just being kept forever for very few reasons. There's no GDPR kind of requirement that is going to lead that to be deleted over time. But if you think about even a video, even in a video at whatever frames per second, only some of the frames of the video are actually useful, and the rest is kind of pointless. And there's some very simple algorithms from 10 or 20 or 50 years ago that can compress not just the file, but also just change the problem that IT is solving from like, oh, how are we going to store all the enterprise's data to actually what's worth storing, what's worth keeping, what's worth throwing away. And so we often talk about AI for business processes, but I have this feeling IT has largely escaped that microscope up till now. It'll be interesting to see what happens.
Sure. Thanks. This is an interesting take, especially that the recent years with easy money were quite largely focused on storing all the data possible everywhere, like literally everywhere. You could have it in one cloud, on another cloud. You could spawn your own data center in general, just because the storage was cheap. It may not necessarily go so expensive, but I'm still curious how will it change over time, especially that all those applications that you've mentioned, for example, focusing on the right data. It may be made cheap, but if someone is just doing a POC, it doesn't have to be cheap, right? Because pre-processing this kind of data just to leave few frames, it's still video processing, right?
Yeah,
it still requires quite a lot of computational power. Yeah, so we will see. Okay, as we are talking about the ROI, in general, it is very specific to an organization. So if you're approaching any company, any organization, how to implement this AI in organization, what kinds of challenges do you see on the political level, on the technological level? How do you see that?
Yes, we're learning a lot, I think, as Dataiku. We've been around for 10 years, and we've always been interested in pushing more data science, machine learning, AI into companies. But we do feel that this moment is very interesting to see what is happening around organization level interest. And so the way I think about the generative AI boom right now is it's increased interest by an interesting amount, right? And there's still that same fear of job losses and risks, but somehow that's mildly attenuated so that this potential is sort of increasing interest to a level that we've not actually seen before. So I think anyone who's interested in driving more ROI from AI, and has to seize the moment, but they're going to be up against some clear challenges, as you mentioned. I think the sort of the political and societal challenge is not going to go away. So I'm personally not as rosy as some people who say that AI will only create jobs. Right? Any technological change that we've ever had changes lots of different things. Right? I believe that the total upside will be higher, but it will take some pain to get there. And when an organization accepts that it wants to go on the journey, right, despite those risks, I think for me, as someone whose job, my job is literally to help those business stakeholders understand that balance and how they go about this in a sensible, high ROI way. It's important to, I always say, sprinkle some of the magic dust into the conversation, right? If you keep the conversation just at like pure numbers and this thing will reduce this thing by 1% over this and this return, it's very important. But if you don't sprinkle in a little bit of the AI magic dust, then AI just does start to sound like everything else, right? Which is fine. And maybe one day it should be. Maybe one day AI should just be one of many tools in the box. That would probably be really good, right? If it was just one of many tools. But I do think, and I think this moment gives us all a chance to take some of those business stakeholders who maybe had the higher levels of skepticism and use the right amount of AI magic dust on them to help them just get that little crack open of oh, I don't have to run this process the way I've run it for 30 years, right? Now I see that not only can I make that 30-year-old process slightly more efficient, this technology could allow me to invent a different way around the same problem. And that's starting to get, I think, very powerful in an organization when you can use the interest, right, to actually drive the business to think differently. Otherwise, it's just more people coming with more tech, with saying, this tech will solve your problem, don't ask how, right? It's not going to work that way with AI.
Sure. Sure, I really like what you've mentioned. So first of all, especially related about this job changes and safety of jobs. Well, IBM already announced that they will be cutting their hiring plans just because they anticipate that they won't need so much workforce because they will be able to solve that with AI support in some way. So maybe it is not like cutting jobs of specific people who are hired already, but definitely it slows down some potential for the next year or maybe maybe similar time. So well, as you mentioned, this is kind of a revolution. It may generate more jobs, but it is quite sudden, and this turning point will be difficult for many people. That's true. I'm still wondering because you've mentioned this part that you need to spark that extra joy in the stakeholders to whom you are talking. Not only calculate the ROI in numbers, you need to spark that joy so that they feel that they can revolutionize part of their business. I would love to know. Perhaps you can share that. What is the proportion of projects where you are just tuning some little thing and it gives like a huge ROI, or you need to revolutionize entire business process to get that benefit on the company level? And of course, this is just a matter of perspective, right? You can always zoom out and treat it as something small, but I would love to hear your perspective here.
I can give a perspective. And another thing about Dataiku is we don't see what customers do. They run Dataiku in their own estate. So I don't have hard data for you.
Sure.
I do know that the sort of the user adoption journey of Dataiku, especially for the lower code users, does start with them automating, as I did 20 years ago, their current process, right? And so, and in some cases, that means they digitize it in the process, right? Which sets them up to do something different. So the typical journey of the person who's building stuff is actually replicating some process and then improving it incrementally. Most of that impact is just from data accessibility and being able to run stuff, right? They get a big uplift in value just from that, but it's kind of it's like a one-off level shift, and then you don't get any further gain, right, from the fact that you invented around a particular problem. And then it's up to them really to think about how they spend the time that they've saved, right? Maybe they relax, or maybe they are spurred on by that success to do something more. And so early on in a typical kind of Dataiku customer journey, most of the impact is on existing processes, right? And that builds some confidence, some trust, some very tangible value. But it's really important for us as a product, in order to keep growing and delivering more value in a customer, for that to change over time. So I don't remember the exact timing of the shift, but one of our customers, GE Aviation, put first hundreds and then thousands of people through training and then into the Dataiku platform. And most of the projects, all of the projects started off as kind of quite rudimentary stuff, and then I think within a year or two, the 20% of them started to involve some kind of machine learning, and then they went from there. Now, things may change or may not with the generative AI revolution. it will be very interesting to see how many people and teams start to try to jump a step, and how well they can do that. I don't know yet how well they'll be able to do that. I think the more that their current process relies on humans touching unstructured data, right? The jump may be more valuable for them. If a lot of their work is more around already structured data and it's about bringing meaning to that, that might take a little longer. So that's the best answer I can give. Everyone starts very, we call it kind of mundane, and then they start to look up really and say, what's possible, and then some very interesting things start happening indeed.
Yeah, but it sounds like a great story of actually building a data maturity across a large organization. So first of all, you're starting with building those very basic reports. Only then you are trying to figure out what is happening in the business according to your data. Then you are focusing on any kinds of predictive tasks where you need machine learning actually. So I believe that that's a great example. I was wondering because you've mentioned about this part of LLM revolution and basically those large language model trend. I'm wondering because it already caused some vector database startups skyrocket in the last months. Can your users benefit from those vector databases?
What would be the
possible?
examples of the startups? I guess we're integrated with lots of perhaps older vector databases in the enterprise space. But what's the new thing the startups are adding?
Well, and they are actually adding this part that you've mentioned related to cleaning up the unstructured data, right? So accessing all this data that was impossible to be used up to this point because you needed to structure it in some way. Right now, you can use, at least up to some extent, large language model to extract the information from this unstructured data, embed it, and so on. At least, well, we could do that a few years ago already, but right now the current hype makes it even more hot, I would say.
Yeah, I don't know about any of the specific startups. I think that in general our approach is to not integrate immediately with anything unless it's a newly adopted standard, for example. But over time, as things gain market acceptance, so this is driven by customers, right? So if customers start to use LLMs for certain kinds of use cases that require them, and if they want to do that using Dataiku, maybe to make it, inside their estate or more scalable or whatever, we definitely don't want them copy pasting corporate data into the internet. No one should really be doing that. Then we will have to integrate with the technologies that make that possible. And customers are asking about those kinds of use cases. A lot of them are sitting on very valuable data that has been collected for one purpose. I was talking to one customer that's a bank last week at the Gartner conference, and they put a lot of human effort into preparing investment briefs and investment advice. And it's already quite well structured data, but not perfectly. And it's a real kind of corpus of intelligence. And so I'm excited to see what people start to do with that data that's been very painstakingly gathered and curated over the years. And if there's new technology that's required to unlock it, then we integrate with it. We don't invest in computation ourselves. We rely on others to do that.
Sure. Yeah. Okay, Shaun, I have first question from the audience, from Tomasz. What are the most fascinating and the most annoying things happening around generative AI today?
I'll probably start with the annoying things. So about a year ago, when particularly the art generation models started, to become quite prolific, one annoying thing to me was like, why do all the pictures look like video games? Until you understand, well, it's trained on the internet, and maybe the people who are using them as early adopters really like pictures that look like they're in video games, etc. And then my late last year, my annoyance moved on to the kind of answers, write me an essay about blah blah blah, and you sort of get back this very good average answer. And to be perfectly frank, I've taught people at universities and things, and a lot of the things that people were writing by hand were not as good as what you can get out of ChatGPT. But there's still this, I guess, feeling me and others have, that it can give you the kind of average smartass answer of a teenager, right? Who's got the answer to everything because they know everything, man, and everything is super confident, even if it's completely wrong. But there's a lot of work happening in that area already about how do we help LLMs understand their uncertainty, right? Because they're not statistical models. That's quite technologically difficult. But yeah, the overconfidence would be the most annoying thing right now. But that's true of humans, right? That's not unique to lots of experts are overconfident and annoying for that reason. In terms of fascinating, for me it's the chaining together of different pieces of the puzzle. So that whole story about, well, it took 10 years for OpenAI to get from what they started with to GPT 3.5, 3.5. It was when they added this thing that was still complex, but could have been done much faster than 10 years, right? The conversational part, that thing plugged into the other one. That's the most fascinating, because then I start to think about, to make this cheap and safe and sort of easy over time. And when you look at some of the open source models that are starting to get good at copying one little bit, they're not going to copy everything, but when they can replicate particular areas of capability, and you start to think about chaining together very small and efficient models that do different things, the quality of results that we might be able to get to for the cost might be really nice compared to the sort of smart aleck teenager that might end up quite expensive if you send everything to it. So that would be my answer to that question.
Okay, I believe that.
What about you? What's the most fascinating thing for you?
Well, that we are actually able to prototype much quicker finally. So when using these kind of models, you can use the fact that they are like zero-shot learners. You can prompt them correctly to become a classifier over some specific text, or perform any other kind of task, and you have like a proof of concept ready, right? At least for simplest cases, which in the past still required quite a lot of data, or building heuristic. And it can surpass the quality of the heuristic, so you can test your hypothesis much quicker with the market. The thing that frustrates me the most, I believe, around this entire hype right now is like we've been putting quite a lot of effort for the last 5 years in NetGuru to unhype machine learning, to focus on bringing actual value. And right now, it seems like everything is gone. You are starting from scratch. Everyone is like super crazy about AI. Sure, it brings quite a great opportunities, and it's actually a revolution. I need to admit that, but still, it's not like a black box that will solve all the problems in the world. And well, it's quite hard to navigate through that it's not like just a single API call that will solve all your issues. So it still requires quite a lot of education, and well, still all those challenges that were related to building the right product, building focusing on the right problem, they still remain, right? Maybe the technological part of building the proof of concept is easier, at least for the proof of concept. You can get leaner when building this kind of solution, but all the remaining difficulties, which were, I believe, the major difficulties, still remain. So
the eternal and difficult things around the politics, the organizational politics,
precisely,
where you fit in a market if you're building a product.
Whether the user, even an internal one, we want to use it actually.
Are we building things people want?
Yeah.
And I think when I reflect on lots of other previous waves, be it self-service BI and lots of other things that data people have tried to do, there has been a bit of a deficit of product thinking and really focusing on the consumer as a consumer and a customer who has a choice. I think a lot of stuff gets built by internal data teams for internal consumption that doesn't get used, and not only is it not being used, people are not even using their Tableau logs to understand what gets used. I think part of that is a resource thing. So most the teams that I managed or was part of were kind of small and lean, so we couldn't afford to maintain everything we had ever built as a POC. We just couldn't. So we were rigorous about turning things off that people weren't using and trying to learn next time to build something that people actually want. So there is a risk, I think, indeed, from your combination of frustrations and fascination that if the if the experimentation becomes so easy, lots of ideas will get tried out. Hopefully there are ways that people converge towards the more valuable of those ideas. Yeah.
Well, if you consider the prices of GPT-4 APIs, the price tag will kill the weakest ideas actually, because otherwise you will go bankrupt. So at least there is the safety switch at this level, and there is one more thing that I just recalled. And there is still this love-hate relationship. I cannot still fully state on which side I am. So basically, the ultimate nemesis of any data solution, like Microsoft Excel. Microsoft announced that they will introduce Copilot to Excel. It sounds cool, right? You can visualize your data the way you want. You can cross-use the data from different spreadsheets and so on without the need to remember what was the import range formula and so on and so on. That's all cool. You can make all the summaries and so on, but it will make even harder for the people to leave those spread marks, which are already kind of a pain. People are going deeper and deeper into that, and it will be even harder to escape spread marks and enter the right solutions with proper data governance, with proper data management, and with proper control over the quality of the data. And even if they will enter that, the baseline cost will go higher because they will have all these fancy features in spreadsheets, which you will need to build from scratch somehow around your new data infrastructure, right? So it is cool from the perspective that smaller organizations will be able to use it. They will have access to those features. But on the other hand, the transition to the major, from the data perspective, organization seems to be much harder.
It'll be interesting to see. Does that make it harder for individuals to go on that sometimes difficult learning journey where they have to kind of unprogram that spreadsheet way of thinking and to start thinking a more governable, repeatable way, which is really hard if you're very powerful in one tool and someone says to be even more powerful you need to give up that power to gain these other powers. It's a tough sell. One thing I think you mentioned, the cost and the governance risk. it would be very interesting if those AI features in Excel lead to a re-explosion of cottage industry reporting and the 2024 cloud equivalent of, well, it's right on the data warehouse that runs under my desk, right? But we still meet people in large enterprises who have got all the data together for their domain, and it is kind of sitting on a server under their desk, and then migrating that anywhere, given that they built it kind of for their own reasons, becomes very challenging. So you can imagine a world in a large enterprise where every single person in finance or every single analyst in sales is separately and differently using a customized AI assistant to do slightly different things to the data. But when it comes to presenting those numbers and being asked to explain where you got them from, they could have gone backwards, right? They could have gone faster, but they could have gone backwards in terms of their ability of and then the CFO wants to know where the numbers came from. And if you just say
how this was precisely computed. This was one of the challenges that I recall Chad Sanderson mentioning quite recently. Well, you can have your co-pilot in Tableau or anywhere else, but still the problem is actually that this data, even in data warehouses, is often not annotated properly. So it will still be hard to get access to this data and make sure that those analyses are proper, right? Because there may be 5,000 columns across your data warehouse, which will have the name cost and what this cost will be about, right? So, well, I believe this generative AI trend can improve data lineage in general, or at least observability of the entire data processing process, and understanding how this data is transformed, annotating it properly so that it is understandable at the end of the processing pipeline what we are actually looking at. So the entire data governance part, but I didn't see any efforts in that area yet. But I believe it would be huge. Okay, Shaun, I recall that you've mentioned that you've been on this Gartner event recently. So as we are also talking about this ROI generated by AI and data, we know that quite a lot of companies are focusing currently on profitability. And they are looking for new revenue streams. One of those revenue streams is data monetization. And regardless of the industry, whether it is regulated or not regulated, companies want to earn from their data. Google being major example, of course, but smaller companies are trying to do that as well. And even those regulations often ensure privacy because they need to. And they don't seem to be addressing the topic of rising data monopolies. Google being example once again, right? And as I saw, you participated in this Gartner event, and there was this super interesting main question of the event: will AI finally democratize data? So, Shaun, will it?
Yeah, that was the title of my talk, and the reason I chose that title is we were talking about it a little while ago. Data people, data vendors have been talking about the need to democratize data for quite some time, and a lot of the ROI of that has been pretty hard to find or disappointing, and from personal experience as well. So what the answer I gave to start my talk is AI might democratize data, but we might not like the answers. We might not like the results, right? So my background is as a political scientist, so I've had a problem with the phrase data democratization for some time. If we think about political democracy, what that means, it means pretty much everyone can vote, pretty much everyone can stand in an election to be elected, and you can kind of say almost anything you want, right, to be elected. And then there's this magic feature of every N years, everything changes. Right? So if you didn't like it for a period of time, right? If we take that to data democratization, anyone can create any data that they want. Anyone can tell any story that they want from the data without thing. And then every 5 years, people can buy new technology to solve that problem. And so I think that generative AI, right, could democratize data by allowing, in the example we were just talking about, for any business user to create any reality that they want from the data. And then there's even more competing realities within the organization. And so I think, like any democracy, right, there are constraints that you put on it, right, to try and get more of the things you want and less of the things that you don't. And I talked about that because I personally care about that. Dataiku cares about that, and I think in this moment we need to make sure that generative AI does not become the answer to all of our previous problems getting value from data. Personally, I believe there's a lot of upside in new revenue streams, new products. There's a lot of upside in the efficiency of how data teams and data people do their work. You touched upon it just earlier. But generative AI is the answer to why didn't all those dashboard revolutions, why didn't they work? If we just sort of think generative AI is like the answer to that, we're not going to like the beast that we will unleash, because we'll be asked to unpick it all. We'll still be, asked to unpick the mess, even if we didn't create it, because that's what's happened in the past as well.
Yeah, that reminds me of one opinion that I've read recently, that, well, basically this entire data analytics is still kind of a sorcery, because, well, these people may be right about making their analysis. You can provide like super precise data, super precise analysis, and so on and so on. But well, you still need stakeholders want to listen to that. Because if they won't like the analysis, they will basically try to discard it by any reason.
Discredit, yeah.
Like discredit it, like there must have been an issue. We have an issue with data. It doesn't add up.
Poor
whatever,
data quality here. You can't trust anything.
Yeah, poor data quality. You cannot trust it unless it converges with their beliefs before they saw the analysis. So, well, this is one of the opinions that I really liked, because it sums up greatly human nature, especially around this kind of stuff. And it seems quite related to what you mentioned, right? We may not like the answers, and even if we don't like the answer, and it will be valid, we will basically discard it some way. Okay, Shaun, we have some more questions from the audience. So one question is from Zosia. Zosia asked, what is the hottest use case of AI in business right now, in your opinion? So I believe it is quite related to what we discussed, but at this moment focus on a specific use case.
Hottest. Most of the hottest ones, I doubt how real they are. I think for me, the hottest ones are always the ones where a process can be reinvented as a result. So we have a customer who a number of years ago was designing engine components. This is before generative AI, but generative AI can actually superpower this. Testing those components to be certified for use is very, very expensive and relies on computational fluid dynamics and very expensive computing. Meanwhile, this company has designed lots of those components for decades or a century. And they have a lot of the data about what worked. So they were actually doing something that sounds very generative, or at least combinatorial, back then. They were using the data they have on the components they've already designed and how well they passed those final tests to push the boundaries of what is possible. That was super, super hard work for them to make all of that happen. And I think for me, anyone in a creative field trying to think of new flavors in a CPG company, new ways to compose batteries inside a vehicle, whatever it might be, that ability to really augment human thinking and human creativity, that's the most exciting thing to me, because that's when generative AI can discover something that we might never have found or might have taken us 50 years. I think recently there was a new antibiotic discovered, right? Which it's just not a combination that we would have, we would have had to have one of those good accidents like with penicillin to find it. And that all of that is what really energizes me completely.
So like using, instead of preventing the hallucinations of large language models, actually using them on our advantage.
I think so. I mean, anytime you have a new capability, a different kind of brain, right? You can, returning to this theme, you can just use it. You can try and make it be more like us and just do stuff we can do slightly better. We're really good at some things. These other technologies are really good at different things. Yeah, anytime that the downsides or the limitations of a technology, including our own, right, can be used to make something better, something else better, then you get like really great combinations, right? It's like one technology never really changes the world that much. It's when you start to use electricity to improve this and this and this, and then brand new stuff starts happening. So that started with the art stuff, but now that that's going to move into other types of data and business problem, there's lots of risks. There's lots of things that need to be governed and controlled. But the possibilities are pretty exciting when it comes to scaling those kinds of processes, design processes.
Sure. Shaun, I have one more question on my own, because there is one more question from the audience as well, but I will start with mine, and we will need to end as we are approaching the end of time we have for today's episode. So, well, as we were discussing the ROI that you can achieve with AI, I will use the metric that was, repeated by everyone everywhere already. Almost 80% of data projects fail. Everyone repeats that for any reason at this moment.
Isn't it funny that it's exactly 80? Really funny.
Yeah.
How did they come up with that?
Well, I saw different numbers put out there, but it doesn't matter actually. It was meant to be high, but in general, if you collaborate with many different companies and many different levels of maturity in terms of data, and you probably saw different kinds of dangers, different kinds of pitfalls into which they were falling. So what are the top 3 dangers that you help Dataiku customers to avoid on their data journey? Like no-brainers, they will appear in most data journeys of a customer when they are going on the road to maturity.
Yeah, so one would actually be if that rate gets too low, right, you're not being ambitious enough. So if everything just works just like that, you're probably working on really easy problems, right? So that's one. I think one of our missions is really like to make sure that all of this is not like an elite sport only. It's really good to have some elite athletes to do really hard stuff and show what's possible. But a big pitfall, and then companies keep falling into this, they say things like, well, we tried citizen data science and it didn't work. So we're going back to the business, write down their requirements, and then they ship them to someone that they never meet who builds something that doesn't meet, that drives me crazy, right? So keep, trying to go back to old ways of delivering projects is a massive pitfall. And then I think getting too locked into any particular set of infrastructure would be the third thing that I would name. A lot of people are making a lot of noise about, we're investing in just this one cloud or just this one data platform or whatever. It feels very safe. It feels high ROI, but I think things are moving very quickly, right? Anyone who's got Snowflake now is probably also going to want Databricks for some use cases in 2 or 3 years' time, right? So going all in on one thing, it just always feels like a crazy bet. But with the technology moving as it is, I think people will want to mix and match.
Okay, thanks. And as I promised, one last question from the audience. So, question from Michał: do you think it is possible that some companies will fail due to inappropriate use of AI? I don't mean a rogue AI or anything, just ignorance about LLMs hallucinating, prompt injection attacks, and the sorts.
Definitely, yes. I mean, we're only starting to see companies be formed around this technology. Threat actors, the same people who already do disinformation and hack systems are going to attach to any attack vector they can. And so, yeah, there will be failures. I think up till now, there have only been sort of lots of scandals, right? But yeah, companies will fail if they don't do it in a safe way, because it's a bit unpredictable, this technology, and that can be used against them.
Okay, cool. So, Shaun, it was a pleasure. As I mentioned, that was the last question that I had today, as we are out of time already. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.
Well, maybe see you around in another episode.
Great. Look forward to it.
Thanks.